Thank you, Kara, and good day, everyone. This is Mark Luba. I lead product management at IMS Global, and it's my pleasure to host today's program, Connecting Curriculum to Workforce Skills. You may know that IMS has undertaken a strategic program that we call Talent Continuum, moving beyond graduation as the endpoint for our interest in student success. We fully embrace the lifelong model, supporting learners in formal, informal, and employment-based learning. We believe that IMS standards can be an important bridge between education and workforce and back. Some of our more recent standards, such as CASE, Open Badges, and the Comprehensive Learner Record, reinforce this vision. Our upcoming summit, which is scheduled for February 11th and 12th in Atlanta, will bring together leaders in the lifelong learning movement. We've learned that the first step in the roadmap for the talent continuum is connecting curriculum to workforce skills, the subject of today's webinar. And I'm pleased that we can bring you two leaders today on that topic. Dr. Deborah Everhart has pioneered open technology standards for competencies, comprehensive learner records, and open badges. She led nationally recognized experts authoring the American Council on Education's publication, Quality Dimensions for Connected Credentials and Communicating the Values of Competencies. Her business expertise includes leadership roles in technology architecture and product strategy at Cengage and Blackboard. Deborah holds a PhD from the University of California, Irvine, and she's a researcher and teaches as an adjunct at Georgetown University. Chris Cardona is the Vice President of Sales for Higher Education at LearningMate. Chris brings deep market knowledge and expertise to develop and execute a strategy that positions LearningMate as a leader and innovator within the higher education space. Combining LearningMate's technology and services, Chris addresses and creates solutions to the most pressing needs that higher education institutions face today as it relates to scaling and innovating high-quality online programs. Prior to joining LearningMate, Chris held leadership positions in major publishing companies, including Pearson, McGraw-Hill, and Cengage. Chris's passion for teaching and learning drives him daily to work internally and externally to create measurable solutions that impact teaching and learning at scale. I'll turn it over to you, Deb.
Thanks, Mark. So, thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm going to provide about a half hour of context on this important topic, and then Chris is going to talk to us about implementation approaches. So, employers and learner workers need better alignment between curriculum and workforce skills. And why is that? Well, the primary driver is because over 90% of students say their reason for education is to get a job or to get a better job. But the unfortunate fact is that many educational programs do not give them the skills they need to meet their career goals. This disconnect has been growing for a long time, but it's more urgent now because education has become a lot more expensive at the same time that agile, continuous learning has become more necessary. Education that is not modular and agile doesn't help people achieve their goals in a talent marketplace where job skills are changing really rapidly. So we live in a rapidly changing world of work, and that's created a problematic disconnect between educational programs and employer requirements. In the past, a single credential could serve an individual reasonably well for a stable career. So the logical progression was fairly simple. You would get a college degree or a technical education, you'd get a job, you'd keep that job for a long time, you'd get promotions along the way. You might go and get additional training or graduate degree to take a step up on a career ladder, and then pretty soon you would retire from the workplace. So most educational curriculum and human resource processes and technology systems were designed around this straightforward progression, but now that's woefully inadequate. New systems are emerging, but in most cases, they're not connected to other systems, and process changes are even harder. So rapid changes created a huge rift between educational curriculum and what employers are seeking as evidence of competencies in the people they're hiring. Not only is traditional curriculum not aligned to job skills, but job skills are changing much more quickly than curriculum has historically been able to change. So, what are the characteristics of this rapidly changing skills-based talent marketplace? This is a complex set of topics. You can see this is a really dense slide. There could probably be a whole presentation about any one line here. But what I'm going to do is go through some facts that help you understand the magnitude of the challenges in this rapidly changing world of workforce skills and why these challenges are important for educators. So, long-term stable jobs are vanishing. Automation and digital innovations are already profoundly changing a lot of occupations. And 60% of current occupations have up to 30% of their activities that could be automated. Automation is just one driver behind the fact that approximately 30% of the workforce may need to learn new skills and find work in new occupations by 2030. And most people are aware of these changes. 60% of people think that very few of them will have stable long-term employment in the future. So as jobs are changing rapidly, employers are struggling to find employees with the right combination of skills. They still use degrees as a proxy for assumed sets of skills, but employers are increasingly aware that hiring based on degrees makes it harder and more costly to fill positions. But the degrees don't necessarily reflect the abilities of the job candidates. So skills-based hiring is starting to catch on, and it can have significant advantages for employers, including up to 70% reduction in time and cost to hire, and up to 75% reductions in turnover. In this arena, the soft skills are increasingly valuable. One could say more valuable than others. These include traditional soft skills like communication, collaboration, creativity, and uniquely human traits like empathy, relationship building, cognitive ability, curiosity, and importantly, the desire to learn. Human strengths are skills that will augment technology and reduce the threat of replacement by automation. More than half of companies say that communication skills are their most valued soft skill. So even when employers can find employees with the right skills for current jobs, one of the biggest challenges most companies will face over the next 10 years is the continuous need to upskill and reskill their workforce. And the majority of people say that they expect this to happen, that they expect to participate in lifelong learning over their entire careers. But at the same time that lifelong learning is increasingly necessary, nearly half of learners say that higher education has failed to prepare them for their career. And a third of people say they would not make the same educational choice again if they were making that decision. So this lack of confidence, unfortunately, is also true with employers, where 60% of employers say that new graduates are not adequately prepared for the world of work. They point to gaps in technical skills, but also in soft skills such as communication, teamwork, and punctuality. Traditional education is really, in most cases, too inefficient and costly. The cost of higher education has increased 8 times faster than wages. And student loan debt, now at $1.6 trillion in the US, is saddling people with decades of loan payments that hinder their ability to make life-changing investments in homes, families, entrepreneurship, and further education. So as lifelong learning is a necessity, the ability to spread out the cost and time commitment of education is critical. Unfortunately, most degree programs are still focused on large one-time commitments that lack flexibility. New types of learning opportunities are emerging everywhere because there's a legitimate demand for learning at different stages of life and career. People are changing what it means to be a learner. They're driving fundamental transformations in education, and pretty soon this will impact all educational institutions and their partners. Learner choices and changes in behavior have huge implications for all of us in the education ecosystem. Competencies are becoming the new currency for careers, and therefore outcomes-based learning needs to become the new normal. Educational institutions need to develop curriculum that delivers the learning outcomes that learners and employers are seeking. Learners who are investing in education will increasingly demand transparency about the competencies included in the curriculum and how they're connected to relevant job skills. And equitable access to learning opportunities cannot be an afterthought, because educators and employers and really all of us in this nation need each and every individual to develop their talents and advance their careers. The good news is technological advances driving change in the workplace are also fueling innovations in new education technologies that enable the evolution of these educational models. The rapidly changing talent marketplace is very challenging for employers. 83% of employers cite an inability to find employees with relevant skills as a critical business problem. This skills gap threatens not only the economic viability of specific businesses, but also our long-term national economic innovation and prosperity. The skills gap can be analyzed from the perspective of specific types of skills also. So 35% of employers have trouble finding employees with the right occupational or technical skills. This is even higher in fields that are rapidly evolving, like IT and manufacturing. For example, in manufacturing, there's a widening gap between the jobs that need to be filled and the skilled talent pool capable of filling them. The manufacturing skills gap may leave an estimated 2.4 million positions unfilled in the next 10 years, with a potential economic impact of $2.5 trillion. And positions relating to digital talent, skilled production, and operational managers are already becoming extremely difficult to fill, and that is already affecting the manufacturing sector. So large gaps like this one call for learner workers to have more access to educational programs that address specific occupational skills in fields like manufacturing, but it also calls for a broad range of occupational skills in management, business, digitally assisted processes like robotics incorporated into assembly lines. And it's important to note that we're not just talking about manufacturing or other types of specific occupational skills, because not only are occupational skills in high demand, but soft skills are also highly sought after. But yet 30% of employees have trouble finding employees with the right soft skills. The majority of companies say that communication skills, written and verbal, are the most valued soft skill, followed by collaboration and problem solving. So helping learners achieve competencies in communication, collaboration, problem solving, leadership, this is a good fit for most educational programs. And in many cases, the subject matter of the curriculum is less important than the practice and development and ability to demonstrate these highly valuable soft skills. But most educational programs do not explicitly define, nor do they transparently communicate competencies that are included in the curriculum. And so when learners graduate with a degree, they often can't even articulate what they've learned and why it's valuable to employers. Unfortunately, a degree is an opaque signifier, and employers assume what it means based on a person's major field of study or the prestige of the institution, which at the end of the day really doesn't tell them anything. Furthermore, educational programs that only result in degrees are out of reach or impractical for most people. More modular programs can help people get the education and upskilling they need when they need it without large investments of time and money. The assumption that everyone needs a degree creates unrealistic barriers for learner workers as well as for employers. On the employer side, it's relevant because currently only a third of the U.S. workforce has a bachelor's degree. So when employers use degrees as a screening mechanism for applicants, they dramatically narrow the talent pool they have for hiring. So requiring degrees eliminates candidates who might have the right skills but got filtered out of the process. So there are many factors at play in the move to skills-based hiring, where employers can more effectively signal the skills they need, attract good candidates, and hire more efficiently and effectively based on specific skills. The hiring practices and the systems to do this are going to change very quickly in the next few years because there's billions of dollars in economic value at stake in addressing the current skills gap problems. Many of the same factors are at play in the rapidly changing world of employee upskilling. As job roles and skills change all the time, individuals need different skills. And as hiring good talent has become more difficult and time-consuming, employers have increased motivation for upskilling the workforce they currently have. So in effect, learner workers who are constantly upskilling will have a lot of advantages, not only for advances with their current employer, but also if they want to move to a different employer, or even if a different field or different type of employment. So employers are racing to keep ahead of their competition. They need to analyze and retain and improve the skills of their employees. Employers' talent management systems are rapidly evolving because the same billions of dollars of economic value are at stake. And employers want to focus on educational programs and training for their employees that's directly aligned to the skills they need in their workforce today and tomorrow. Because most educational programs do not transparently articulate the competencies they include, employers don't necessarily see these programs as a good investment. For some employers, education in general is recognized as a strong employee retention benefit. But increasingly, both employers and learner workers expect educational programs to be accountable for the value they provide, both in general and in helping people achieve specific competencies. So when we consider what we all need as learner workers in this rapidly changing world of work, it can be dizzying and complex. So I think it helps to distill it down to some core needs for learner workers. As educators, we can start by focusing on providing learning opportunities that are transparent, modular, relevant, valid, equitable, and aligned to careers. So this set of core needs is not all-encompassing, but it provides a useful way of talking about how we would make improvements as we develop and design curriculum that's valuable in today's talent marketplace. This can also help us analyze the shortcomings of existing curriculum offerings in order to improve them. So what do these broad concepts mean in practice in educational programs? Transparency means that information about an educational program, including the competencies it includes, its labor market value, its cost, is provided to learners and employers to enable them to determine value based on their own needs and priorities. Transparency supports career opportunities by helping learner workers and employers understand the alignment of competencies to job skills. Modularity means that an educational program includes units that require less time and cost than a degree, and they can be combined in multiple ways to create career pathways. Modularity supports stackability so that one learning opportunity can be built on another and demonstrate attainment of broader, more complex, more specialized knowledge over time. Relevance means that an educational program provides concrete evidence of learning that has currency in the talent marketplace. Relevance supports career opportunities by helping learners achieve competencies that are in demand by employers. Validity means that an educational program includes competency assessments that have been professionally designed with appropriate rigor, and that those assessments demonstrate what learners actually know and can do. Validity provides a shared understanding and a trust in how the program has value for learners and employers. And equitable means that a program enables educational, social, and/or economic mobility. Equitable educational programs help low-skill, low-income, first-generation, and other disadvantaged individuals learn valuable, relevant skills that lead to career opportunities. So all of these add up to educational programs that provide more value. We can see how that looks by thinking about this diagram that lets us visualize what learner workers need and how their career progression is really a continuous cycle around this circle. So this learner wants to get a job or get a better job. So they search for educational programs that include the competencies they need for their career goals. They enroll in these programs, they learn, they achieve the competencies. The educational program provides evidence of their learning, which they can use to articulate their own competencies and share their learning achievements with current or potential employers. The employer matches these achievements to the required job skills. The worker gets a job, and then later, in order to progress and get a better job, the learner worker decides to upskill and learn more. So she searches again for educational programs that include the competencies she needs for her career goals. And so this cycle continues. So clearly there is a disconnect between what employers and learner workers need in this rapidly changing environment and what educational institutions are ready to provide. And for better or worse, the burden of addressing this disconnect becomes a challenge for educational institutions because they need to continue to attract the learners, and by extension, the employers who pay for enrollment in educational programs. So educational institutions need to take a hard look at their curriculum and determine how they can offer programs that are relevant in this environment. Offering the same types of traditional programs or simply tweaking them over time just will no longer sustain enrollments if the programs don't have outcomes aligned to in-demand skills. And with increasing competition from online and non-traditional providers, those who cannot quickly adapt to these changing needs are going to find themselves at a really serious disadvantage. Add to that the urgency of the rapidly changing job skills, and the challenges look even more daunting. Because even if programs can be updated to be more skills-based and aligned to learner worker needs, how can they be kept up to date in response to changing hiring patterns and economic shifts? Curriculum development and revision at most educational institutions is slow and cumbersome. The content and assessments come from different sources. They're housed in different systems. They're often siloed in different LMS courses. No one knows where all these resources are, how they're organized, how recently they've been updated, whether or not they're versions. So this is particularly difficult, for example, if you want to use learning resources for different purposes. Maybe you want to use the same learning resources to offer a degree program, but also offer more modular short certificates. There's no easy way to redeploy and reorganize resources for these purposes. Most institutions don't have capabilities for managing learning objectives and competencies, let alone their alignment to job skills. So for the critically important need to measure whether the curriculum leads to learning outcomes that reflect mastery of relevant competencies, most systems lack analytics that can show not only learning progress, but also progress towards specific competencies. Let's see, it looks like sorry, missed a slide there. Skills-based hiring calls for competency-based curriculum so that the learner workers can articulate their own skills and the value they provide to employers. Competency-based curriculum is also important for marketing your programs and for communicating how they include in-demand skills that justify the cost, the time, the effort. So educational institutions unfortunately face a lot of challenges in addressing these needs. The challenges of defining the valuable competency frameworks, designing learning experiences that help learners achieve these competencies, effectively assessing the outcomes, using analytics to track progress and mastery, helping learners see and understand their own progress, providing evidence of learning, and continuously improving programs based on outcomes, as well as adapting to in-demand job skills. There are challenges on all of those fronts. And you're an IMS audience, so it's no surprise to you that siloed technology systems present additional challenges. So they complicate the problems of managing content, assessments, competencies, outcomes, analytics, and all these separate systems. And siloed systems are problematic not only for the people responsible for curriculum development and delivery, but also for the learners. Because without comprehensive interoperability among systems, learners are going to hit dead ends as they try to progress through the content. They don't have a clear picture of their own progress. They can't visualize the alignment of their learning activities to relevant competencies. And so siloed systems make it almost impossible to provide holistic knowledge frameworks. That all sounds pretty dire, right? But fortunately, some of the same technological advances that are accelerating skills-based hiring are accompanied by advances in technology systems for agile curriculum development and delivery. These are systems that you can use to align content and assessments to competencies and workforce skills, measure learning outcomes aligned to competencies, track the content usage, reuse and reconfigure content for different programs, including degrees, certificates, badges, various types of professional development. Connect different delivery platforms together to provide holistic learning pathways, and to really be able to develop a single source of truth for content and assessments, which can give you a one-stop shop for managing learning resources. Technology innovations are providing a lot of new opportunities. And so what are the effective practices for using these technologies? More and more institutions are realizing the benefits of backward design. Backward design is called this because it's the opposite of most curriculum development processes. Most curriculum development processes start with the content, they organize it in a time-based way into course weeks or modules, assess each of the modules, and add up the results. So in this really common methodology, it's assumed that learners are going to progress through the content in the order and pace laid out by the weekly structure, and either they'll pass the assessments as they go along or they won't. The core premise here is that time and content are fixed and the outcomes, that is, the learner's achievements, are variable. Backward design really shouldn't be called backward because it puts the most important things first. It focuses first and foremost on what learning outcomes are desired. So what do the curriculum developers and the learners themselves want to achieve through this body of curriculum? That means defining the competencies first. Then, when you have a solid set of competencies in a logical order, determine what assessments are going to give you valid measurement of achievement of those competencies. Then think about what learning resources the learner will need in order to understand the concepts, practice and apply them, and pass the assessments that are going to measure achievement of the competencies. So content needs to serve the learning outcomes. The core premise in backward design is that learning outcomes are fixed, focused on success for each and every learner, and the time and the sequence and the content can be variable. In the backward design methodology, the types, amount, order, and structure of learning resources depend on what learners need for success. And since that success is going to vary for different people, it's unlikely that a fixed set of content can be predetermined. That calls for the need to continuously track learning analytics, measure the outcomes, evaluate the effectiveness of learning resources, and then as learners are using the resources or soon after, the curriculum developers can come in and revise and improve the curriculum to improve the learning outcomes. Backward design goes hand in hand with agile development and innovation. And this methodology provides value not only for continuously improving learning outcomes, but also for rapid innovation to adapt to changing job skills. Backward design, by its very nature, necessitates end-to-end competency alignment. When you put the learning outcomes first, the competencies need to be defined so that they can provide a structure for alignment with the assessments and learning resources. And assessments aligned to competencies provide accountability for the validity of the curriculum. It's not sufficient for learners to just interact with content. They need to understand it well enough to succeed on the assessments. The assessments need to be robust enough to accurately reflect what learners know and can do. Rote memorization and passing through just are not good enough. So your curriculum can become much more accountable through end-to-end competency alignment. To look at these concepts in more detail, we can consider the process of ADDIE: assess, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. These steps are an effective practice for any curriculum development. And to address the ongoing challenges in workforce skills, curriculum developers will often need to go through this process repeatedly. First of all, assess the need in terms of what job skills the course or program needs to include and what the learner should know and be able to do by the end. Design the structure and methods of instruction and learning activities, develop the assessments, implement those assessments in the delivery system, evaluate learners' demonstration of skills, and that means closely analyzing the individual learner's success to help them progress, but it also means analyzing the aggregate success of how the learning activities and assessments are effective in helping the learners achieve those results. That way you can use analytics to make informed decisions about how to improve the curriculum for improved learning outcomes. So these steps can be applied to any body of knowledge. They're applicable whether you're working on a large curriculum, such as an entire program, or a specific curriculum component, like a targeted learning module. Backward design and the ADDIE methodology are most effective when they're practiced in a technology environment that enables holistic curriculum design. Most educational institutions, they can patch together some of these components, but not very many have a seamless combination of all of these. And these include content management architecture that decouples content and data from delivery so that you can have agile reconfigurations of the content, data structures for reporting and informed decision-making, well-defined metadata, and the ability to apply that metadata to all of your learning resources. This will let you do search, discovery, tracking, competency alignments. Centrally managed and reusable content and competencies, consistent content and activity tracking, individual learners' data and achievements that are aligned to competencies, and of course, interoperability and integration using open standards such as LTI, Caliper, CASE, and Common Cartridge. Today's next generation learning ecosystems can provide best of breed combinations of different systems and components. So your institution can determine the best combinations for your needs, and IMS standards make the connections that enable that holistic curriculum design and delivery. You can use IMS standards to develop the frameworks for workforce skills in CASE, the Competencies and Academic Standards Exchange, and also the competencies for the curriculum in CASE, author assessments and assessment items in QTI, Question and Test Interoperability Standard. You can deliver assessments alongside other learning resources, choose whatever LMS you like, and use LTI, Learning Tools Interoperability. You can create whole sets of learning resources and deliver them in the LMS of your choice using Common Cartridge, the Course Content Packaging Standard. You can combine learning resources from a lot of different sources and different types and use LTI, collect analytics events using Caliper, the Learning Analytics Standards, and aggregate analytics events in a learning record store using Caliper. So when you use these multiple standards to construct your curriculum development and delivery ecosystem, you can understand how your curriculum is performing in order to make end-to-end continuous improvements. But the bottom line is, how does a unified learning ecosystem enable learners to achieve their goals and connect the competencies they're mastering to in-demand workforce skills? Because learner workers deserve to apply their time and effort in a learning environment that provides holistic learning design and really supports them from start to finish. Given what I described above, your interoperable systems can enable you to develop and deliver curriculum that's planned, designed, delivered, measured, and supported in a holistic learning environment. This includes the centrally managed competency frameworks that articulate what the learners are expected to achieve, a content management architecture that decouples content and data from delivery, that lets you have different delivery methods that can engage learners at the right level of learning. Consistent content, activity, and outcomes tracking, that'll make the progress visible. It'll help learners see and sustain their own momentum. Individual learners' assessment data aligned to competencies to measure their valuable competency mastery results. And so with these components all supporting learning, your learners benefit from a great combination of knowledge acquisition, active participation, authentic motivation, and engagement that leads to progress toward that valuable mastery of competencies. So all of this ultimately adds up to improved learning outcomes. You can develop a relevant competency-based curriculum that's aligned to in-demand job skills. Add to that assessments where learners demonstrate mastery of competencies. Add to that progress indicators so that learners understand and can articulate what they've achieved, and you'll get improved motivation and completion. Improved motivation and completion for learners in your programs that's important to your institution for all kinds of reasons. But the critically important reason these programs will be successful is because more and more learners will value them for helping them achieve their explicit goal to get a job or get a better job. Learners who invest time, money, and effort to participate in your programs will get the valuable outcomes they're seeking. They'll be able to articulate what they know and can do. They'll be able to make connections between the competencies they've mastered in your curriculum and the job skills they know they need to succeed. And with that, I will hand it over to Chris.
Great, thanks, Deb. Let me go ahead and pick it up. While I'm getting ready to share, isn't Deb great? Thanks so much, Deb. The context you provide and the insight that you always have is always so valuable, so thank you very much. And thanks everyone for spending some time with us this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks, my pleasure. I know it's a lot of material, but hopefully well organized.
I think so. So let me go ahead and, my name's Chris Cardona, as Mark had mentioned. I'm Vice President of Sales for Higher Education here at LearningMate. And so before I hop into kind of a little bit of the context and a little bit of the capabilities that we have that enable institutions like yours to be able to connect curriculum to skills and ultimately track the outcomes, I thought it might make sense to just give the broad audience just a little bit of background on LearningMate. So first, LearningMate is a global global educational technology and services company. We were founded in 2001, around 750 plus employees, along with a very large team of freelancers that we often tap into for support and service. Our main office locations, again, as a global company, are across the world. So we mostly are found in New York, Phoenix, London, Vancouver, Mumbai, and Calcutta. And as you can see on the screen, we work across a series of verticals, higher education being one of them, but we also work very closely in K-12 as well as with the state level, as well as in workforce training. And so for the context of higher education, let me go ahead and just kind of give you a little bit of an understanding of kind of where we fit in how we collaborate and partner with higher education institutions. First, working closely with IMS Global, we work with institutions to help them enable and achieve great flexibility and return on investment in content and curriculum by providing a middleware platform and layer that sits between content and the learning management system and provides a series of tools that enable a lot of the types of functionalities and requirements that were problems that Deb had alluded to earlier. This includes tools like full taxonomy and outcomes management. That's then integrated tightly with a learning object repository that ultimately then links with content from a variety of providers, as you can see in the bottom. Then that content and the taxonomy is all associated and works closely with a learner record store. And again, our work with IMS helps us, enable a lot of ease of use of these integrations. And again, by ultimately having this middleware layer, this is where we can really start to help institutions change the process and the workflow so that they can much more closely work to identify skills, connect them to the curriculum, and then ultimately deliver them to the learner so they can generate the most value out of their time and investment at the institution. So knowing this is an IMS audience, I'm going to warn you here in a moment, you're about to see lots of circles, squares, rectangles, and arrows. So bear with me, but we'll walk through it all together. So this is when we really start thinking about putting something like this in practice. Again, being an IMS audience, hopefully this isn't too overwhelming, but what I'll do is let me walk through sequentially how you can start to visualize and understand how having a middleware layer like this between, ultimately your LMS and content can enable you to have processes and workflows that really help you connect skills to curriculum and then ultimately give learners that evidence of mastery so that they can take that to the workforce to differentiate themselves and hopefully, attain either a new job or a promotion at a job. And so, as Deb mentioned, one of the most important things in trying to connect skills to curriculum is implementing a process and workflow and a technology ecosystem that allows for you to utilize backward design to develop content and curriculum. So on the lower left-hand side, one of the first things we have to do when we're trying to work with an institution or an institution is trying to do tighter alignment of skills to the curriculum is to have a source of data for the skills. Those sorts of sources are much more prevalent and available now than they used to. They can come from sources like Burning Glass or MC, Google Skills API. There's a variety of different places in addition to the institution's practices where they may have employer roundtables and things to that effect that advise the curriculum. But again, by leveraging backward design, if we have that skills data and we move it into a taxonomy and outcome management tool and use that to actually begin developing and authoring content and curriculum that is centrally stored in a learning object repository and then ultimately delivered to the LMS or to whatever delivery vehicle is most appropriate. It's not uncommon in institutions now to see multiple LMSs or utilizing different LMSs for different purposes, like the School of Continuing Education or Professional Studies may have a different LMS than the traditional campus or the online school. And then ultimately, if you follow the diagram, what you're able to see is none of this could really be effectively done if we weren't leveraging IMS and IMS standards, because it's through that interoperability where we're able to provide seamless experiences for your instructional designers, your faculty members, your learners, and then ultimately, the other people who may be in this process as well, whether that's the folks from your data or your institutional research, because as you can see, what we're able to do is ultimately tie all of that skills data and move it over to your delivery vehicles, and then have strong data data processes that allow for a lot of transparency about what's working, what's not working, and so on and so forth. So again, I know this is a lot to consume, and we're coming up on our Q&A time. My contact information will be available, and I'm certainly more than happy to take much deeper dive into each of these aspects as you see fit. So in addition to that technology middleware, one of the other things that we know that for an institution to be able to effectively drive this sort of innovation, it takes both the right technology and ecosystem, but it also takes the right workflow and process. And as a result, what LearningMate has and does is more than just the technology. In addition, we have a series of services that you can see on the screen. And during our consultative process, we take a deep dive with our partners to identify and articulate what their specific goals are, what tools they have in place, what processes they have in place, so that we can ultimately design a solution that helps you most effectively, drive that innovation and create, a process and a delivery of curriculum that is very tightly connected to skills. And so at the end of the day, the point of our entire, hour that we're spending together is really talking about how do we help learners and workers achieve their goals. And to reiterate some of the points that Deb made, right now, it's absolutely critical that, institutions are supporting learners by having curriculum that's aligned to in-demand skills, making sure that that curriculum is relevant, and that it provides employees or learners with opportunities for upskilling, because ultimately it'll help them be more job ready and achieve the goals they want because they have relevant skills. And the last piece, Deb touched on this as well, which this is critical for all institutions, is at the end of the day, this sort of process and this sort of strategy really helps drive learner success. If we start with curriculum that's aligned to in-demand skills and have assessments that demonstrate competency, the learners are going to have those progress indicators and ultimately have more motivation and move towards completion more quickly because they can see what connections they have between what they have achieved and what the employers are actually seeking. So I will go ahead and end there. And Mark, I believe you may either have questions from Q&A or...
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Deb. Just terrific, very insightful. Appreciate the overview, Chris, and thanks again, Deb. I did have some questions. So while we're waiting for the participants, the attendees to provide their own, if you don't mind, one has to do with simply semantics. And we've been involved with competency-based learning and assisting schools and employers to work together on a common set of workforce competencies, let's say. And the question always presents itself about the language barrier between the educators and the employers. How do you address semantic differences between the academic and work domains? And does the terminology, the language, does that actually impact your ability to align?
So the worlds of academics and of workforce will inevitably be different. And that's not just a problem between academics and the workplace in general, but even different industries or even different companies will have different vocabulary in terms of the job skills that they want and need in their employees. So it's my opinion, and others can certainly weigh in, but it's my opinion that we shouldn't ever expect the specific language of all of those competencies and skills to exactly match up. I think that would be unrealistic, especially since both arenas are continuously changing. But what that means is that the type of technology and data infrastructures that we're talking about are even more important, so that you can understand, for example, in a competency framework, what the relationships are among those competencies and the level of learning so that you know, for example, that this might be an expert level of learning as distinct from a novice level of learning, and be able to use open standards to say this is a competency framework, be able to use open standards to say that this is the job skills framework, and let technology, for example, AI, be able to bridge that difference in many cases. In some cases, there will be collaborative efforts where educational institutions and specific employers or specific industries will collaborate. In some cases, there's specific language that comes direct from the field, like manufacturing has very robust common vocabulary for how all of these skills are described and what the levels are. So in some cases, you will be able to do an actual alignment, but in others, I think we're going to have to let technology do a lot of the work for us in terms of giving the technology the ability to know what's a competency framework and what's a skills framework and what the desired outcome is in terms of linking them to each other.
And I think, what I will add to that, Deb, is I'll take it from a, very much so from a technology perspective. This is exactly when and where and how and why sometimes this is difficult for institutions, is because there's often a disconnect between the taxonomy, the outcomes, the skills alignment, and the actual curriculum and the delivery. So with the right sort of tools and the right sort of technologies that have strong taxonomy management that allow you to make those associations and to make those alignments, even at a scaffolded or hierarchical perspective, it makes it much easier to look deep within the curriculum to see where and how things are related, so you kind of bridge some of that disconnect or that confusion, Mark, that you were alluding to.
Excellent, thank you. On the subject of assessment, what role should industry have in the formation or validation or the evolution of assessment processes?
I think this is in some ways similar to the academic competencies and job skills discussion, is that you're going to have, in many or most cases, assessments that are part of the curriculum that are different from the assessments on the employer side. However, employers typically do not want to do assessments. They want to outsource that to some company that specializes in it. Even soft skills assessments, they outsource that. If they're in a field that has its own specific certifications, like manufacturing, there are industry certification bodies that manage those assessments. So the alignment is to be able to articulate how the academic assessments align to the industry recognized assessments. And that's typically going to take you back down again to the competency level.
Mm-hmm. And Deb, I think from a technology perspective, the thing that I would also add there is that I think as you start to look at what employers are expecting and what learners need to be able to curate and take with them, it does cause for a shift in some of the traditional assessment practices that we've seen most readily used at the institutional level, whether that's summative, formative assessment that's providing some data on progress, followed by some sort of summative machine scoreable assessment. We are seeing a shift towards institutions that are looking to develop, more authentic assessment, more performance-based assessment. And again, tying those authentic assessments and those performance-based assessments to specific skills and competencies and outcomes, and making that alignment, provides a learner with a really rich artifact that they're able to then share to show an employer that they have acquired these skills, as opposed to something that maybe doesn't articulate that very well, like saying, I got a B in the class.
Thanks, Chris. And for you and for Deb and for Mark. I know we're running out of time, but there is another question that I'd like addressed. Among the standards provided by IMS, which do you think is more relevant to connecting competencies to job needs?
I have my opinion. Do you want to go first, Chris?
Please fire away. You first, Deb.
I think case is most relevant because all of the other standards are in service of being able to clearly define and articulate the competencies and the job skills.
I agree with Deb.
That was easy.
It's great.
And I agree. I mean, to just reiterate on what Deb said, so many of the other standards are very critical in creating and delivering that sort of learner and assessment experience, along with, creating the critical feedback loops that are required and enabled through, the instrumentation and the data that can be provided either, by Caliper or other formats. And again, it's absolutely critical that, all of those components, are part of the discussion, because case alone, without a strong, process through which you're delivering and aligning, delivering, and then ultimately gathering the right reporting, may or may not, yield the impact that an institution is trying to, yield.
Great, thanks, Chris. And thanks for your answer to that question. You'll see that Mark is sharing right now the Digital Credentials Summit information, the event that's happening in February that he mentioned. We do have a preliminary agenda already posted, and we are updating that daily with additional session and speaker information. So we encourage you to please take a look at that. And just a reminder that we will be sharing the recording and the slides for this session. You'll get an email with that information. So with that, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Deb and Chris and Mark, our speakers today, for a great session.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take good care. Happy Halloween.